Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Saath podcast, ASR's newest initiative where we talk about substance use disorders within the context of the Punjabi community.
Through inviting mental health experts, researchers, community members, and those with lived experiences, we discuss everything from the history of addiction to the lived realities of Punjabi families alongside providing relevant resources.
We are your hosts. I'm Ravia. I'm a community organizer and researcher from Edmonton.
I'm Manvinder, a social work PhD student from Winnipeg.
I'm Harleen, and I'm a medical student and anthropologist from Indiana.
I'm Harpreet. I'm a clinical researcher and an epidemiologist from Toronto. Thanks for joining us, and let's start the conversation.
Today we're going to talk about the Punjabi community and alcohol, like we usually do. But today we'll be giving some context, some historical context, maybe some conversations on things like masculinity, drugs in Punjab, colonialism, and migration. Our aim today is to move away from the idea we have as a community that substance use disorder is an individual issue or a moral failing or a choice that affects one person in one context. And Manvinder and I will share why it is not that. First of all, we should introduce ourselves. So I'm Ravia, and I'll introduce Manvinder first. She is a superstar. Her and I have been working together with Asra for, I think, 5 years, right? 5 years. And we ran Broken Punjabi groups together. We've done presentations, written together. We work together a lot, actually, right? So Manvinder is currently a PhD student at the School of Social Work and the Department of Anthropology at University of Michigan. And she is very educated. She has a master's in religious studies from McMaster and master's in social work from University of Toronto. And she's held really cool research fellowships all over the world, including Delhi and Victoria. Last year, Manvinder actually worked in Punjab as a research associate for MIT's Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab on a project centered on improving opiate addiction prevention protocols in Punjabi high schools. She also has done so much grassroots work of organizing and chatting to people about addiction in the Punjabi community. And talking about the historical context with her is going to be so fun because she has so much information.
No, thank you so much. I feel like, um, yeah, I feel like we both just have so much information. And I'm always like, hey, fun fact. Like, it's not always a fun fact, but I'm like, oh, now Ravi and I can just fun fact.
It's actually like really depressing fact, but it's fun.
Yes, it's like a deeply upsetting fact.
But it's
But
so
it's fine. But
fun.
it's reality, so it's a fact that must be
Ex-
shared.
exactly.
Yeah, and I can introduce Ravia. I've also known Ravia for the same amount of time she's known me. Yeah, I've known her since 2020. Ravia also loves school and has been in school for a long time, which is great. We love that. She has an MA in Migration and Diaspora Studies. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Alberta. Correct me if I'm wrong. Her research interests center on addiction. She's done a lot of community building work. Her work has included decolonial approaches to addressing problems with alcohol in the Punjabi community, as well as understanding opioid addiction in Punjabi Canadian communities, and what the barriers to mental health and addiction are to support Punjabi Sikh men specifically. Currently, she is a Pathy Foundation fellow, and she's working on a project titled Centering Punjabi Grandmothers in Community Addictions Education and Support. So I feel like when Ravi and I chat, like, we both have like similar and overlapping research interests, but then we also have like deposits of knowledge that the other person doesn't have. So I feel like we'll be great at filling in each other's gaps, as well
Yeah.
as like, yes, when
Yeah.
we both know the same thing.
It's fun. Oh my gosh, that was great. Great introductions. But jumping into the context and the problem of that we're going to be talking about is first off, I mean, like, I feel like everyone knows that this is an issue in the community. That's why ASRA exists. That's why we've had such high engagement. But we can talk about why is this an issue? Why is substance use disorder such a huge issue? And why is it such a big issue right now? We have pulled up stats here. So we have interesting statistics that we find online, and we believe in contextualizing all the data. So we found this obscure stat talking about 80% of Punjabi youths who died in Canada were from overdoses. We can link it in whatever way we share this podcast. Like, the one thing we want to ask is, where is the context for this? Manvinder, what
Yeah,
did we think about this?
I guess, like, maybe not even this 80% of Punjabi youth who died in Canada were overdose. Like, yeah, maybe not even that statistic, but like taking it even further, kind of when substance use in Punjab was blown up was, of course, around like the time of Urta Punjab. And I don't know if Urta Punjab precedes or comes after this, like, other statistic. But Rahul Gandhi, I think he was making a speech somewhere in Punjab, and he made a comment about how 70% of Punjabi youth are addicted, period. Like, that was his statistic that he pulled out. And either Urta Punjab came from that, this like kind of narrative that was created, or it came before. I think it came after. But essentially, he had, I'm not sure who advised him on this statistic, but he had pulled it out of a study in which the study was already like located at a de-addiction center or rehabilitation center. So all the folks at that center were already using drugs, they were at a rehab, and to like be at a rehab, there has to be some sort of like substance use involved. And of those youth in this sample, in this study, 70% of them were like diagnosed with a substance use disorder. And like the diagnosis for that like the criteria for that diagnosis is like pretty specific. It's not kind of like a throwaway, this person is
Yeah.
addicted. You have to like fall into, like, you have to
Mhm.
yes on certain things. So to kind of generalize to like the entirety of Punjabi youth, of those 100%, 70 of them are addicted versus this like small sample size of people at like youth at a rehabilitation center, of those 70% are addicted. So it's,
Mhm.
yeah, like fairly important to not just throw statistics around, particularly because of the supremacy we give statistics and numbers and like empirical data. Because it's not just like a standalone thing, it's
Mhm.
somewhere. It's just easy to digest.
It is easy to digest, and like context is so important to understanding. What's your sample size? What's the context? What time of year was this done? Where was this done? A rehab facility? Interesting. And like, this is like thinking about like, okay, these stats exist and like we are critical of them, but they are also indicative of like a larger issue that like we experience, and that like we don't like just see it as an issue that's just in youth in Punjab or just international students in Canada. It's like everyone. Like, it is cross generational, and we often think it's just men. It's not often just men in our community. And we see a lot of that like also indicate that this is an issue in our community, like things like Roshni Clinic in Surrey, that is specifically, it's, I think, a South Asian clinic, but they do Punjabi language like programming. And who was on our first episode actually works there and gave us more insight on what the population there looks like. And then here, where I'm based in Edmonton, we have the Severa Medical Clinic that when I spoke with them a few years ago, they said majority of their people that they were serving were actually Jat Sikh Punjabi people. Like, it was like a very small part of the South Asian diaspora. While there were, people that weren't in that population, that was like the majority of their clientele. But yeah, these clinics have like shown that the community needs this support and they are providing that support. And like they definitely need funding and things like that. So they are like given that funding because of they're showing up for the community and there's a need. Um, so it is an issue, essentially, is what we're trying to say. But
Yeah, I guess. And then I think like statistics like that 80% of Punjabi youth who died in Canada, like 80% of international students who died in Canada were of overdoses. I think that shows up, like from that statistic, I think, as far as I know, comes from the community. So it is important to contextualize that as well, in that the statistic is coming from the Gurdwara, because often students who have to be repatriated to Punjab, that's a helpful avenue. It's an expensive thing to do, like take a body back to where, yeah, they want, like it to the to back to their home. Um, so the Gurdwara can be a helpful, yeah, middle person in doing that. So they are privy to this information. And it's also a call to, like, yeah, include more statistics about, or like do, yeah, more data collection that does encapsulate how international students are actually dying. So it's not to negate
Mm-hmm.
80%, because I do believe it's true. Like 80% of youth that the Gurdwara helps repatriate are dying of overdose, and potentially more, because overdose isn't always what people say someone has passed away from, and it doesn't always like manifest as that. It might manifest as a heart attack on like an autopsy. So it would be, yeah, like something to think about, how
Mm-hmm.
like declare someone has passed away because of a heart attack versus an overdose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then I think it's also a call to, yeah, because of this supremacy of data, to collect more data on this, because I think it's the classic, like, if you have no data, then there's no problem. And then if
Mm-hmm.
there's no problem, why would anyone fund
Yeah,
these services, or like,
exactly. And you found this in your research too, like when both of us are reading and looking at alcohol or opiate or other addiction related things. Like I was an undergrad student that basically had no choice but to interview people locally to get data on showing that this was a real problem in the community. Because there was nothing aside like maybe blog posts and like the existence of a clinic that gave it like background. So creating like okay, creating content like this podcast is another version of that. Like being like, oh wait, there's something out there, but more, I guess, like what you said, the supremacy we give to quantitative statistics is also conducive to like us needing those statistics to find legitimacy of this problem.
mhm.
Everything is this because nothing is real.
No, so true. Yeah. Um,
So yeah. But like how did we get here, I guess? Like I guess that's like why we kind of started off with like a background of like, is this a problem? What's going on? Um
yeah, maybe we can like hop back and forth between
mhm,
like historical context.
yeah.
So I guess like when I was doing my thesis, something I found was, yeah, again, this like need to be like, are there statistics to back up that like the Punjabi community or the Sikh community is like specifically like having, like, if they specifically have challenges with alcohol, with substance use. So there is this need to be like, is this even a problem? Um, and yeah, so I think that was an issue. And then you also need to legitimize that it's more of a problem in one community than it is in another. So it has to be in this comparative way. There's kind of
Mm,
this like, there's no existence of like a problem just existing as a problem. Like it has to be worse than other communities. And I think when you're working with like, yeah, with a non-white community, it also then bears the possibility of it like reinforcing like backwards narratives, because you have to be like, we're the worst, we have the most problems, so that you get
yeah.
the ability to like collect data or like do
Mhm.
research. So I think, yeah, when I was like looking, I was like, what is the literature on this? Is there a problem? And there are like two or three papers. I think we all kind of like, whoever works on
Mhm.
this in, yeah, whoever is like interested in this has like read them. They're from like 1999 or like the early 2000s. There is like newer stuff coming up, but it's still pretty like scant, or it's like from the UK, and there's, I think, almost nothing from the United States. Um, yeah, so there is like a little bit of stuff, but then yeah, I was really interested because I think even growing up, there's this like narrative of like, did we even drink? Like, where did this alcohol come from?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it
That's so
really in like
true.
the culture? Yeah. Like, there's also this idea that like Sikhs don't drink. And then like before the British were the Mughals, so it's like Muslims don't drink. There's kind of been this like telling of the story of the history of India in which people, it's not like Indian in quotes to
Mm,
drink. Like India is a country of teetotalers, like everyone is
yeah.
abstinent. So then I was like,
Hmm.
it's true. And it's not, obviously. Like there are different ways that people were using substances, that people were like, yeah, consuming alcohol. Like in the Mughal courts, like wine is a very like
Mm,
royal beverage to engage in.
I didn't
Uh,
know that.
yeah, and then in like the courts of different rulers, I won't make any like large claims. You can look it up. It's true. I feel like people come for you if you say like, yeah,
Yeah.
there are certain emperors and certain empires that did probably consume alcohol. But yeah, that definitely did occur. It's also like in the Vedas, there's like reference to substance use. So it's not like this new thing that the British gave
Hmm.
us. Um, there have been
Hmm.
like traditional and cultural uses of it. Um, yeah, I think if we,
Perhaps.
yeah,
Like perhaps like exacerbated by conditions of imperialism, colonialism, but not new. Do
yeah,
you think?
yeah. I think like the use of substances or like consumption of alcohol is not new, but I think the ways in which we do it and what kinds are available and like why we are partaking in it does shift and change. And of course that does have like a personal reason for it, but it also has this like historical, political, like the law is intimately tied to it. I think if we just like think about ourselves, like what we are and are not allowed to consume, and then where we have to like go find that thing that we want or need, um, yeah, it has to be outside of like the regulated market. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think like in the not so distant future or past, like yeah, cannabis was not legal. So like the different ways people are consuming cannabis was not through like the regulated market. So even consumption patterns now are deeply impacted by the law, which is
Hmm.
inherently political, which is also
Hmm.
like historical. So I think, yeah, we
Hmm.
can even see it there. And I know, yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about like traditional or cultural uses, but that's, yeah, definitely also something that we talk about, like the ways it
Yeah.
shows up in
The ways it
culture.
shows up, the ways it shows up in culture, and then like back to the conversation or the point you made about like being a minority researcher in a space where you have to like perform pain to do research is difficult, but it's also like doubly difficult being a minority in India where your culture is negatively portrayed with alcohol, like in Bollywood and other things. And this, I think there has been studies on this. I feel like I've read things on that. There's like a lot of music that is, just furthering like entrenching these ideas of uh, like I feel like there's just like, oh, you're just stupid and you drink, like that's all you want, that's all you are, and there's no like context or interesting things to you besides that you're drunk all the time, and oh, that's kind of funny, and you say funny things because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like there's so many like, okay, yeah, people are really mad about like songs about alcohol or like things on that, but it's like realistically as like cultural uses, like these singers are simply writing about the times, singing about the times of like real things that exist in the community. So like you can be critical of it, but also like it's what exists. So they're gonna
Totally.
we're gonna talk about things that like we experience. So it's not lying either.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it's like a, not the best portrayal, but it's different, like I think if it's coming from the community versus like outsiders portraying it. Like maybe that's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think like a lot of people like to like they're like, why is like alcohol a problem in the Punjabi community? Like we're so confused. They're like, it must be the music, it must be what we're
Yeah.
consuming. But it's not like such a one way process. Like singers aren't like
No.
sitting in isolation being like, I'm gonna write a song about alcohol. Like definitely they're glorifying it, maybe they're romanticizing it, but
Maybe
also
it's
like
by
it
a like production company, like,
yes, yeah.
yeah.
And it is romanticized and it is glorified. So it's not like up to one individual to like write the romanticization and glamorization of alcohol out of their songs and then it'll all change. Like
Hmm.
if that was true, like it just is like a silver bullet, like easy solution. Like it just, yeah, it would be hard to convince me that that's
Yeah,
possible.
it's true. And it's interesting because um like if we think about the ways that I've read about of traditional uses, cultural uses of alcohol and opiates have been like in ways that were considering alcohol as like daru as medicine, and then like being an agricultural state, being laborers, there was a lot of having doing physical labor and then having a drink or having opiates to kind of like be more productive. Like that was a huge part of like how people trace back the origins of substance use, like the exacerbation of substance use. And like culturally, like if you're sick, maybe someone will give you like brandy to like drink and maybe that'll help you feel better. And there's like a lot of, I don't know, I guess like speculation. Like I feel like this isn't a new point. Like people are like, oh my God, Daru medicine is the same word. But I think that does actually, if we look at it like contextually, I think it does make a little bit of a like point. Like it's really like a point where you're like, well, people are hurting, so they find a type of what they see as medicine. So
Hmm.
um, you know.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
think I think it reiterates that point of like what is the function of it now? Like what is
Hmm.
like the type of consumption that someone is using it for? Like
Hmm.
yeah, to like make generalizations like if someone is using it to like work longer, that's different than like perhaps how people are using it now and like the availability of like the kind of substances.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, like I think we could look at our own backyards and think about opioids and like
Hmm.
the different types available, what's regulated, what's not. And then similarly in Punjab, are you not allowed to grow opium? Where are you allowed to grow opium? Like, what kind of opium then is available for you? What is cheap? What is expensive? Yeah, so I think if we think about these things, I think the reason for why people use substances becomes more complicated, and therefore, like, the recovery also becomes more complicated. So I think it's
Hmm.
then we're able to like think a little bit more about why someone can't just stop using a
Hmm.
substance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like figuring out those whys, I feel like throughout the other podcasts we've done has been like the point of like um not the point, but I guess like the most like important
Mhm.
part of the journey of like recovery, if that's what we're gonna call it. But going back to like cultural uses and all of that, um I wanted to make the point of like how much alcohol use and like the impact of alcohol use in the community is like coming up in like cultural things like boliyan and geet, and like how there's this one bully that comes to mind of like he came home drunk and he grabbed my gut and beat me up, like, and it's everyone's just like good
No,
one.
you have
Like it's,
to,
and I
yeah.
like I wish I could do the bully, but like if someone knows it, please tell us. And like it's like a real, like, I don't know, it's just like there's so many like factors that are like tied to substance use in our community, and that like that it just becomes like I like a like it's inextricable almost from like the cultural traditions in a
Mhm.
way. Doesn't have to be, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that I mean is like a an oral history tradition of like passing
Mm.
down knowledge. So then if we're like to
Yeah.
take oral history seriously as like knowledge, then that is like evidence. that it has
Mm-hmm.
occurred for a long time.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think usually
that's
women
true.
like bear the brunt of
Yeah.
the problems that occur with it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not new, but it's also like
To,
continuing. So, yeah,
mhm. Yeah, do we want to talk a little bit about colonialism?
let's get into it. Should
Yeah, so
we?
I think
Mhm.
we did like a yeah, it's like a historical thing, like in Mughal courts, it's in the Vedas, like old ancient Hindu texts, or like what we now call Hinduism. That's
Mhm.
a conversation for another time. So yeah, it's like the way it's been consumed is changing. There's traditional uses. It shows up in Bolia. It shows up in songs today. Yeah, and then yeah, I guess I'm curious about then the history of like what's
Mhm.
happening politically in Punjab that's like changing the substance use. Yeah, so I'm wondering. I think like the the elephant in the room is
Mhm.
always colonialism. Yeah, I guess
Was.
yeah, I guess there becomes this like toggling back and forth of like there's stuff happening in Punjab, and now that people are migrating, there's also Punjabi stuff happening in Canada. So I
Mhm.
think there's kind of like two stories or like multiple stories happening at the
Mhm.
same time. But like to take us to even before migration, yeah, I guess we can focus on colonialism because it does become this like very important like moment that does change a lot, which is why I think a lot of the focus is on it, and because there's so many like ripple effects that like stay with us up until today. So I think it that is I think like why there is a focus on it as opposed to like empires and things that happened before it, because of course like people have been
It
living
is,
in Punjab for a long
yeah,
time. Yeah,
yeah. It is the most recent, and those laws are still in place. So
yes. So it
there we
informs a
go. Yeah.
lot of the ways in which we do what we do. But I was listening to a podcast called Empire with, I believe, Anita Anand and William Dalrymple. Dalrymple. He's a British guy who moved to Delhi and like lives there now for a long time. He's written like a lot of popular work on Delhi, and then Anita is Indian but was I think born and raised in the UK. So they're kind of like having this conversation about empires more broadly, but they spend a lot of time at the first couple of episodes. I think of like the first lot of episodes is about the British Empire. Interestingly, they point out that like the actual British Raj was not even 100 years. So this thing that like yeah, that impacted us and continues to impact us for so long, like did like yeah, it's important to realize how long it lasted. And of course it's like not this entity that just like dropped into India. It like had a lot of pretext. So that pretext you can listen to the first 3 episodes, like 3 hours of history from them. So it does actually date back to the 1600s. But interestingly, and I don't know if this is relevant, but perhaps it will become relevant, kind of British rule in India started as a corporation, a rule by corporation from the East India Company, and then officially in 18 what is it 58, that's when the state it turns to the state.
Mhm.
So it's yeah, kind of a move from a corporation to a state,
Mhm.
and that
With
does also come with its own shifts. But I think we
mhm.
focus on like the British Raj. So it is like colonialism dates back to the 1600s, but this like specific British Raj is
Yeah.
interesting in and of itself. Um, Starting from 1858, which also wasn't that long ago. Like
No, and
my grandma's grandma would have experienced that,
yes,
or like my
literally.
nanny's, yeah, my nanny's mother
Yeah.
potentially, yeah, my nanny's mother or my nanny's
Right.
grandmother. My nanny's nanny would have experienced it. So that's not
Yeah.
even like if you count how many generations that is, that's not that many. So like
No.
I think as I get older, I realize how close this actually is to
Mhm.
us. So yeah,
Exactly.
Rabia.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, you're right, it is super close to us. And the like change from the East British East India Company, right?
Yeah.
To the British like British India,
Yeah.
there was like a bunch of annexations, and I guess what's relevant to us was that Punjab was annexed in 1849, so it was just about like 10 years shy of the official like Raj um, of the country, I guess.
Hmm.
But yeah, like even that is super close to us temporally, but also like as we just talked about, like the ripple effects of it are just like that makes sense why like the ripples are so large still. Like they're still hitting us. So
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah, that's just to like show you how close it is. And yeah, hopefully that like gives some of that, the taste of like that closeness. So I guess like the British, along with their, yeah, need to build us railroads, their need to like put in school, like put schools in place, the need to like take consume, to tax.
colonies, good
Yes.
farming. Oh.
Yeah, like all of,
Yeah.
yeah, all of this, all of these things were happening, and at the same time there are also like, there's also people present.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's like, I guess, introductions to like new alcohols, like new ways to consume. As Ravia shared, like a lot of people in the British Army were sick soldiers, so there's also this like drinking culture that happens, like the
Hmm.
sepoys, like the soldiers in the cantonments. There's like a drinking culture present there. So
Hmm.
yeah, and I think like if we
Exactly.
think about like PTSD, like the people who are first, like the subjects of study for PTSD are soldiers. So I think there's like a myriad of things happening there. And like people have written better than I am speaking now about like what happens in the cantonments, like the British, the
Hmm.
Indians, like drinking culture, drinking consumption. So it is
Hmm.
influencing how people engage with substances. But then also, yeah, there's this notion, I think, as we continue, and then I think India is trying to position itself as its own nation, which is
Hmm.
then in opposition to what is British. So then some may argue, some have argued that then alcohol and drinking becomes a British virtue, which is, and like the opposite of what is an Indian virtue, which
Hmm.
is to not consume alcohol. And I think, yeah, this becomes like, I think this then brings in the conversation of hegemony, which is an annoying word, but it is like what is like, yeah, I guess the things that become culture are those things that are practiced by those in power,
Hmm.
and those in power, like in the British, like whatever counts as British culture, that is dictated by the powerful, and then whatever gets counted as Indian culture, like broadly across the subcontinent, is also dictated by the people in power. So then we're kind of
People,
getting like
yeah,
mixing and melding like different ideas of like
absolutely.
what
Yeah.
is substance use, what are people's relationships, what is
Yeah.
Indian, what is
What is, yeah.
anti-Indian, and it's all like also in this like attempts to gain independence from the British.
Finding a new
So
identity as a nation. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It's a part, it's interesting you say that because it could be a part of like a nation building project,
yeah. Well, it's also like
essentially.
who, yeah, like who consumes alcohol now, who doesn't, who gets painted as
Hmm.
alcoholics now, who doesn't. Is
Hmm.
that even true? Like stereotypes
Mm.
also like are hegemonic, are created by the, or like are like further ingrained by the powerful.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting to think
absolutely.
about that.
And like the point you made before, I just found this quote I was just reading today. So this is actually from Jesse Renata's work, and he has quoted this. I was reading his work today, who we interviewed previously. But talking about like six Punjabis being, first of all, soldiers and then farmers was kind of like the two identities that were orientally like placed on them. Sure, they were came from warrior backgrounds. You could make that argument pretty easily. And yes, the like place of Punjab the Indus Plains is like very fertile. So like there is like a connection there. But this is an interesting quote by Malcolm Darling in 1925, who was the Assistant Commissioner of Punjab, provides an account that captures the epitomization of the Jat Sikh. This is the quote. The Jat is a very marrow and soul of the peasantry. Jats have a tenacity of character and a skill in farming which makes them the best cultivators in India. It would be difficult in any country to find a more remarkable combination of cultivator, colonist, emigrant, and soldier. Educated and organized, and relieved of the handicaps imposed upon him by custom and debt, he might well become the foundation of a new rural civilization in Punjab.
Mhm.
So it's interesting when we think about that as like the role of the community in a nation building project post independence, and also the role of alcohol thrown in there is really interesting because if we think about what you were saying as a martial race, like the soldiers, and then the British recruiting that, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So like kind of being like okay, and then like introducing alcohol in various ways, um, and then like that being kind of like perpetuated, and then that dichotomy you talked about in the post partition kind of being like, wait, what is real and what is not real? Like what, or
Mhm.
sorry, who is like the real person, the real Indian versus the non-real Indian?
Mhm.
Um, those are, I don't know if that was relevant. I just thought I thought it was related in some way.
I think it is. I think it makes like it does paint Sikhs as like good subjects. Like they're saints, they're soldiers, and they're great subjects. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's interesting to think about, both at in like its truth and then how it gets manifested. And I think it's also
Mm-hmm.
like a flattening of identity. Like either you're
Yes.
a soldier or you're a farmer. And I think like
Yes.
I guess to like close the loop on what we were talking about, like the opium to help you work longer, that's like in the farms mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So you're able
Exactly.
like to do hard labor for a long time, which like
To
still does continue today.
It does. And like to produce for the British Empire at the time, during the time
Hmm.
of his writing, while India was going through mass famines, and a lot of the food was being like made in Punjab, it was not being fed to Indians essentially. And that was, led to various revolts. We could look that up on your own time. But I think you're right. It is a flattening of identity. And it's like an Oriental kind of view of like, and a denial of like a diverse community, and like just being like, yep, you are a soldier, you are a
Hmm.
saint.
And like to
It's
serve what means.
to serve what means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like why is it helpful for the British to position Sikhs as good soldiers and good farmers? Like how does it benefit them? Not in
Hmm.
this like
Hmm.
nefarious, they're like in their offices like toiling, but their
Yeah.
goal is to extract goods and like from the people of India. Like that is their goal.
Hmm.
If we're going to like flatten
Hmm.
their the point of them being in India. So that
Hmm.
that is their goal. So how does like the Sikh fulfill that goal, particularly like the male Sikh? Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, and then I
The
think
industrious. Yeah. Sorry.
yes, yeah, the
Yeah.
prosperous, the industrious Sikh.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love going or like
Definitely.
I love reading people's work on the archives. Like they really saved everything. You're like everyone's
Yeah.
journal. It's there for you to read at the British Library. Um,
What?
or
I
like
need to
a
do this.
I guess,
Oh my
yeah. I
gosh.
think
Yeah.
like when you and I were chatting,
Yeah.
another thing that came up that I like was not, I feel like as I like gain knowledge, I'm like, this is all obvious. Like, of course this is true, or like,
Right.
of course everyone knows this. But something that I learned like later on was that Indian law is colonial British law. Like the current law practiced in India is British law. And like when I was in India, like people, I lived in Chandigarh, so everyone there is a lawyer or like preparing for an exam to become a lawyer. So it's so interesting to like engage with them in this conversation. Um, yeah, because like they are memorizing British law. So yeah, it's interesting to think about how that continues to govern the people of India, even this like free new nation of India, how it carried on and still holds on to these like colonial legacies, these like ghosts of colonialism that like manifest as real and continue to like dictate what everyone does every day,
Yeah. And like
which
the
is what
lived
the law is.
realities.
Yeah,
Exactly. Like the lived
yeah,
realities of Indians are reflective of this colonial law to this day.
yes. So I
And
think
related,
like
yeah.
no, like the law is a big part, even like in Canada, in the United States. Like that is something you have to abide by. It is something that guides your day to day. So it's just interesting to think about this notion that like, oh yeah, and I think there are like attempts to change certain laws, but it is interesting that a lot of it still is from the colonial era, like written by the British to
Yeah.
rule and govern the Indians.
hmm hmm And then we can talk a bit about how that impacts alcohol and mental health, maybe. Do you think
Yeah.
so? Do you think it's a good place to do that?
Yeah, I guess like I'm not an expert on law, but I do know like when I was in India, every single establishment we went into, there would be this like printed out piece of paper that was like, don't consume drugs here. The NDPS Act says you cannot do drugs here, like you will be prosecuted by full extent of the law or whatever. And I was like, okay, that's really intense because like we don't really see that here. So it's like something different, so I am noticing it. But the NDPS
hmm
Act is the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. So it's a law in India. It is post colonial law, like post the British Raj law. So it's a law in India that prohibits the use and distribution of drugs and psychotropic substances. It was first published in 1985. So from what I know, it's a product of like Reagan era laws where he was, and this is very crude. I can signal a different podcast that talks about this more in depth, but it's kind of like drugs are bad, let's all ban drugs. Drugs should be illegal, then people will stop doing drugs, then everyone can go to work and contribute to the economy. So it was
hmm
kind of like, yeah, you're kind of being strong armed. And by you, I mean like nations that are kind of dependent on the United States. Kind of like
hmm
right now, what's happening, you're being strong
Yeah.
armed by the United States to pass certain laws, which criminalizes drugs, which wasn't always the case in India. So then there is this like criminalization of substances that were culturally like acceptable to use, and there are in the Indian Act or like the NDPS Act in India, not to be confused with the other Indian Act. There are like certain exceptions, like for religious purposes, but this like war on drugs does like precipitate into India as well, and then does also influence how people interact, are able to interact, how they are then like criminalized and imprisoned based on that. So it
hmm
does, yeah, it's kind of this like maybe new imperialism, we could call it. Like a
Yeah,
British
yeah,
Raj, there's this like this new superpower that's also like kind of dictating how people can interact with substances.
yeah. Like the international influence of the US in the 80s, like
Mm-hmm.
especially, and I wonder, and this is just me speculating, I wonder how that's related to like um US aid that was giving to India and World Trade Organization kind of like askings. Like there's been a lot of, you know, concessions from states like India to these countries, like maybe introducing the NDPS Act, like you're saying, from the Reagan era. So I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense in the like general, I guess, like political economy of the world.
I mean, like, we could draw different conclusions. I think what you and I
hmm
are doing is we're drawing like one or two or three of those conclusions. So people are like welcome
Mm.
to draw whatever conclusions they want to draw. And these are the ones that like make sense to us. So this
Yeah,
is like, yeah, just to reiterate, like this isn't prescriptive. Like Ravi and I aren't
no,
like the authorities on this, but this
at
is just like
all.
a way to think about history and
Yeah,
like potential influences.
yeah. And it is like it's a iterative process of like seeing how different, like I guess all history, historiography, like you're trying to just unpack and like connect the dots of policies and happenings and relations that led you to be in the place where you are. So it's like a really, I guess you could call it like a patchwork understanding that we're putting together for this podcast, taking our influence, taking our interests. Again, signals to how much more research on this is needed. So that would be great.
Yeah, I think, and then there's multiple influences to things. Like it's not like, yeah, as like singular or linear. Like it's not like
Hmm.
because Reagan did this, this changed, and then that happened.
No,
Like
yeah.
there, yeah, or this did happen. This act was enacted, put into
Hmm.
law, and then like various outcomes
Yeah.
came about. Yeah, and I think similarly, in this like how the British or colonization shapes like literally how we think. Like we could, yeah, pivot to mental health and addiction. Like these are
Hmm.
both terms, mental health, addiction. Like these are English language words. Yeah, so it's interesting to think about like when did people start talking about addiction? When did people start talking about mental health? And like how
Hmm.
did that evolve and change? And like what are the different reasons for that?
Like in
And
Western context. Yeah.
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 It's I think like something that bothers me is when people say there's like no like Punjabi word for depression or there's like no Punjabi word for like divorce, thinking that this means like that it doesn't exist. But it's also interesting to think about like the different ways it has existed and maybe like why it doesn't exist and then like not generalizing. Like if we are
Hmm.
using depression in North America, what does that look like in India? Why
Hmm.
does it come about differently? Um,
What are the
yeah,
like medical legal contexts of that term in North America or
yeah,
in the Western context? And then also thinking about the different ways that like depression, even divorce, and mental health, like these words can have shapes in different societies that have different structures for support, for relationships, for viewing the individual. Like if we take it down to like the bear theory and like, yeah, we can. I'm also critical of like, oh, you're collectivist, you're individualist, but it's like a helpful way for us to look at how these terms are not like transferable, I guess, but it doesn't mean that those experiences don't exist in both communities, like the experience of depression, but they
hmm
are shaped and like formed and in different ways. And
hmm
by shaped and formed, I mean how they are communicated, how they are treated in like a community way, or how they are like seen by maybe like a friend or a family. Like those are all different shapes and forms of, let's say, if we're talking about depression. And the
hmm
same goes for addiction.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about like who is allowed to be depressed. Like even
Mm.
in North America, like not everyone gets to have that diagnosis, which sometimes is a privilege to like know yourself in such a way that the way I'm feeling has a label and it has a diagnosis, which can be helpful, can be problematic. Like I
Hmm.
think, yeah, to be able to put words to what you are feeling or experiencing and then having someone engage with it as like a real thing is a privilege. And I think we also like do this like this creation of hierarchies where we like intrinsically think that like all white people or like yeah are like non yeah all white people are like able to have these like conversations and they live in this like utopia where they're like always talking about depression, being diagnosed, giving like support, but it's like not true. Like it's like I think if we don't idealize white communities, we can see that there's also multiplicity in them, not to like yeah, not like illuminating that in a way where we're not putting communities in competition with each other, where we're not
Hmm.
then like feeling bad because we aren't able to get to the same spot.
Hmm.
There is obviously like privilege involved when you're talking about white communities and their ability to access services, But I think sometimes it's like, oh, like the Punjabi community, we don't even have a word for depression. Like we're so backwards, we're so stupid. Like white people like invented that word, like good
Oh
for
my
them or whatever. Yeah, so it's like they are like this forward-thinking, progressive society, and then we are like backwards and we don't even know that we're depressed. So I think kind of re-feed into this like colonial backwards narrative.
Yeah, and I think there's also like an interesting cultural context if we talk about depression or addiction in like Punjabi communities. Like there's like a if there's a denial of something, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Like um sorry, what I'm trying to say is like apne log won't admit to something that is going to like kind of be shitty. Like they're like, I just don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Like honestly, truly, I think there is people can call it saving face, calling it like like living in a communal society, all of that. But it's also like um there is like a real kind of like, well, I don't want to talk about this because it's gonna like kill the vibe. Like I don't know if that actually is like a real thing. What do you think about that?
I guess I think about what you were sharing about like your experiences with like the grandma's group, like the yeah,
Mhm.
Bibia. Um, yeah, um, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Like from that experience, what I saw was like that there is like they talk about it and they're like, yeah, it happened and it sucked, but like I'm here now. Like, there's like and to be fair, we haven't like specifically talked about like addiction or anything, but like if we talk about things that were perhaps like not great experiences, they're like, yeah, but by God's grace, I'm here. Like, they're very like
Like we move on.
where we move on. And maybe that's a generational thing, like back to the British, like keep
Yeah,
calm and move
I
on.
mean
Like,
it's
like
not.
it goes, it's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not improbable. It's also like the what they have experienced is so different, like their frame of reference is
Hmm.
so different. Like I assume these bbm potentially lived through the partition, depending how old they are. They lived through 1984, like they've lived through like true real tragedy, where it's like maybe something like talking about, and to like simplify it, like I'm feeling sad every day, like that's not top of priority. It's kind of this
Mm,
like survival versus like
yeah, that's so
and yeah.
real.
Yeah.
And I
So I
think
think like their
maybe,
frame of reference is also different. And like
and
what is
maybe,
important to them is different.
yeah, and I think maybe that's also like a part of the conversation of like, there's no word for depression, but like, okay, like we don't have time to be depressed because you're working all the time. Like there's that big survival,
Yeah.
like, piece of it of like, if you were a subsistence farmer in Punjab and then you came here and you were a truck driver trying to make like a living, like there is no time for you to think about how shitty you feel. Like you're
Hmm.
trying to survive. So there is, there is like, that's a huge reason also like, it is like we were like you were saying before, it's almost like a privilege to sit around and think about how you feel.
Totally.
Um,
And like be able to
like,
give words to that.
and have time and space to like reflect on your experiences
And it's like
and
deemed worthy. Like it's worthwhile. It's a
yes,
good
it's
use
deemed
of your time
yeah,
to
because
sit
you're
and talk
not.
about
And
feelings.
it plays into that same productivity thing, like, are you an industrious, productive person when you're talking about your feelings? I don't know if that's the case. And I think that also trickles down all the way into like modern day relationships that we see of um like brown men being unable to like find space to talk about their feelings or find value in speaking about how they're feeling. And then
Mhm.
maybe that being a reason why Apne Lok are relying on alcohol to maybe talk about these things. Again, like these are just like connections I'm making as we're speaking, but like
Yeah.
maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if nothing else, it gives you like the space to like understand others better as opposed to like, yeah, I kind of think like a theme of our like chat
Mm,
today is like yeah, don't brush it off. Like if you have the capacity
Mm,
to like think about it, like
mhm,
contextualize it, historicize it, like politicize it, individualize it. Like there's lots of
mhm,
reasons. I think maybe instead of thinking like this person has bad intentions or like this person is just innately inherently stupid,
mm,
yeah, there are like possibilities that get opened up if you ask different questions.
mhm,
And that's not always easy because sometimes like that person is the one actively harming you, so you don't also need to understand them. Just like I think
mhm,
for me, like when there's distance, it's like okay, there's a reason, and you don't even have to find that reason. There just like is one, and that's like sometimes enough to be like they're doing what they're doing. It's not intentional, even though it harms me. Yeah, there's like
mhm,
more behind it. And maybe that's like an
mhm.
intellectualizing of your life, but like one of the many ways
Mm.
to exist, I guess.
Yeah. Contextualizing. Are we gonna find out the difference between like, textualizing and actually growing and going to therapy? I don't know. Like,
Is it,
sorry,
do you have to
that's
do
that part.
both?
Yeah, do you probably do. No, that's true. Um, totally. And yeah, that is like a part of the like all of these historical factors and things play a role in like this is not an individual issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the end of the day, that is the point we're trying to make.
Yeah.
And all of these, yeah, like all of these, like the pathologization and all of that plays a role in how people who are struggling with addiction are treated or are dealt and yes, like you said, there's like if there's harm in that relationship, it makes that more difficult. But like, let's say a person is trying to access resources, those resources become harder and harder to access um, because of things like stigma and an inability to like have space to talk about your feelings, have the time to talk about how you're doing. Um,
And even like as we talked about like neoliberalism's like push
mhm,
to always, and capitalism's I guess, like push
mhm,
to always be working, producing,
mhm.
like
Yeah,
having generational wealth, like all of that, it's
exactly.
like to be
Yeah.
productive is also stopping you from doing things that aren't gonna like immediately make you like more money.
Yeah, I know, because you're actively like pulling up the bootstraps while there's like a boot on your neck, being like, make money,
Yeah.
survive, feed your kids, send them to school. Like these are all real experiences that end up resulting in things like substance use disorder,
Yeah, I
addiction.
think in like some of the stuff I've read and like some of the people I talk to at like different clinics, like sometimes people like men will not get help. First of all, they like might not even realize that they have like a substance use issue, but oftentimes they won't get help until there is like a biological response to their
Mhm.
substance use, and often they
Mhm.
seek help because it's hindering them from working.
Yeah.
Like it's hindering them
Yeah.
from like yeah making money, going to work, like
Mhm.
fulfilling their
Mhm.
like duties as a father, as a husband.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
like people are not getting help until it's impeding
Their
uh,
productivity
their
and
productivity,
relationships. Yeah.
and their like access to
Yeah.
capital, like money,
Yes.
so they can live.
That's super real. It's
Yeah.
super real, and I think that's, like, actually one thing that Bhavanjeet we spoke about was, like you'd said, like, there's a really specific criteria to talk about, like, pathologizing or sorry, what's the word? When you
Diagnose.
tell diagnosing. So, there's really specific criteria for diagnosing substance use disorder, and one thing she spoke about is, like, a lot of people are really productive while doing opiates or alcohol or other substances.
Hmm.
And that makes it difficult because oftentimes it is not impeding their day-to-day kind of routine. So like
Yes.
what is addiction? And I guess like that's where we can maybe like talk about like that would be a good like segue into understanding how harm reduction works and how harm reduction can be a pathway of like actually understanding um like, not just only villainizing alcohol or substance use disorder as bad for just existing. Like, those are and, like,
Hmm.
creating that, like, bridge of empathy that is sometimes difficult to have, often difficult to build, but, like, is so important to have that, like, possibility of recovery or, like, relationship rebuilding and all of that.
Also, like, interesting to think that, like, diagnosis, like, the criteria for a diagnosis is also wrapped up in, like, someone's ability to, like, work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, yeah, like, the criteria for a diagnosis is, like, does it impede your day to day? And, like, usually
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't. And, like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, I'm kind of making this, like, connection just now, like, of diagnosis and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like, of what like, it's, like, specifically missing this part. So
Yeah,
if it
yeah.
is, like, purposefully doing that,
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah, like,
Mm-hmm.
something that it has to affect you in a way that it stops you from working. So it's also, like,
Mm-hmm.
intentional on the part of this diagnosis that it doesn't recognize that. Because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it, like, evades the people that write the DSM, that
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily have to impede your day to day for it to be a problem. So
yeah,
it's very interesting. No, I think it's like as
yeah,
long as it's not impeding your ability to work and like contribute to the economy, then like you don't need a diagnosis, which means you don't need treatment, which means you
yeah.
don't need to like use precious like taxpayer money
Resources.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true. In the Canadian context, it is like a different,
Like you're not getting money or
different
support from the state
social,
unless you can't work.
yeah, it's a different like social responsibility. Exactly. And we have something here that we kind of like segued away from. Like we had talked about maybe speaking about partition and the impact of that on addiction and mental health. Did we want to go into that now?
Like kind of the origins of like mental health and like how we understand it as we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess like before when we were talking about, yeah, like where does mental health appear in the Indian context? I had read this book on like the psychology and trauma, like something along the lines of like 1947. It was written by like two Indian psychiatrists, and they like opened the book with the short story Tobatek Singh, which is a short story by like a pretty famous short story writer from India, Manto. Um, Highly recommend it. And they kind of point to it as, yeah, kind of this, yeah, of like mental health, like the psychiatry has also been around in India because it tells a story of Toba Singh during the partition. So the separation of India and Pakistan that happened along the lines of Indian and like Punjab of India, Punjab of Pakistan. And one of the first like issues that bureaucrats had to deal with is moving people from prisons who are like who want to be Indian, who want to go to India, and Indians or people from India who want to go to Pakistan. So like inmates and people in like psychiatric wards, which of course I'm sure they use like what is now like an offensive term for these institutions. So that's like something people have to deal with. Like, how are we going to move prisoners? Like, if we are partitioning this huge piece of land, and people who are not in prisons are moving, the people in prisons also have to move, which is also like if we think about it, is also like yeah, so interesting. Like people who are locked up in psychiatric wards, and people who are locked in prisons being told that hey, like this country is partitioning. Where do you want to go? India? You want to stay in India, or do you want to go to this new place called Pakistan? So Toba Tek Singh, I think, is in present day Pakistan, and he's like confused. He's like, where do I go? And it is also like told through this lens of like what they call lunacy, or like, yeah, like a mental health challenge, like a psychiatric disorder. So he is like so confused about the creation of this like India and Pakistan separation that he ends up dying like on the partition. So he is of like both places, but of nowhere. So it's kind of this like telling of psychiatry in Indian history, but also this like the like mental health toll on that like the partition placed on people, or how it influenced or impacted people. Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe it's like everyone is going through this, but I'm like, as I get older, I do understand this, like, or I understand it a little bit better. This, like, complete like bamboozling effect that can occur when like a people who are not like of your land or community coming in, partitioning your land, saying there's like a new country being formed and you have to choose, pick up all your belongings, leave your house behind, take your kids, pack up and go. And of course it's like a little bit more complicated than that, to be honest. Like there are Indians and Pakistanis involved, but it is also like a line just being drawn by a guy who was like,
it's essentially that.
yeah, like he
Yeah.
was like Radcliffe was given this map, had never been to India. They were like, draw a line, and he said, "Give me 6 weeks."
Give
So
me 6 weeks. Give me 6 weeks of work and then I'll go to vacation, he said.
no,
Like he
exactly.
said, I gotta go see my girlie back in the UK. You're like,
It's like
okay.
not even that long ago. Like
No.
1947 is not that long
My
ago.
no, just for context, my BB was just talking about this. The only reason they know the year approximately where she was born was because it was around
Yeah,
47. And for people born in that time period, a lot of our grandparents of our generation are people that are like, oh yeah, like ਜਦੋਂ ਪਾੜ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ, like, and they call it kind of like, I forget the word she said, but she kind of cut like, I'm gonna call it hullabaloo because it essentially sounded like that because she was like, ਉਦੋਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਚੱਲੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਦੋਂ, and I was like, what?
yeah,
Okay. So it's like a real, like, actual, what you said, like the bamboozling of like, and like looking back on that now and being like, how did that impact the general population? But then the story that Manto writes of Tobastik Singh dying in no man's land is like so much, like it's just like it is so indicative of like the way people felt at that time and the way that like I think we are still coming to terms with in a weird way because we are learning this later in life and then having to come terms with it and like being informed by it is really, it's, you get really existential. I get
hmm
really existential. I don't know if everyone does when I
yeah.
start
Or
thinking about,
nauseous.
yeah, just like that, and then colonization, how we ended up as settlers on Turtle Island, and what that means for us. Like,
hmm
where are we,
And
like,
where do
in
we
this?
want to go?
Where do
Like,
we want to go? Where are we going to dream about our futures? Like, this has
speaking
gone
of
so
dreaming, I
beyond.
have speaking of dreaming, I have an article I'll send you because I can't do
Oh
it
my gosh.
justice to bring it up here. But everyone should read Manmeet Singh's article in Sick Formations about killing the ally. Um, yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of deals with this like dreaming of futures in a way
Mm.
that is like viscerally uncomfortable, but I feel necessary. Plug.
Love
Um,
it. I love
yeah,
a visceral encounter.
yeah, yeah. Like, oh, my body feels this.
Ah.
I am moved to do something. Yes. I feel like we were like pulling on different threads. And I think, yeah, like this is a great precursor to like other things that we'll be talking about. Obviously, we didn't delve deeply or like statistically into everything, but I think, sorry, like later episodes we'll be able to do that. Like we'll be
Yeah.
able to think more about why it was specifically Juts that were doing this kind
Mhm.
of like the, yeah, like the toggling of caste, like what role does caste
Mhm.
play in this and continue to play
Mhm.
in this.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't get to talk about gender a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like, yeah, I think like as we kind of chatted and discussed,
Mhm.
like this is more of like a precursor to other things, and it gets, I think, everyone
Absolutely.
situated to like how we are thinking about this.
I think so. I think that's a really good way, yeah, to like contextualize our understandings of addiction, substance use. And then like thinking about it in the diaspora context, because like, why are there so many of us in Canada? In the UK, Australia, the US. We'll probably only talk about Canada because
Yeah,
Manvinder and I are from Canada, but we have members on our team from other places, so we can have those conversations too. But just
no.
it is, there is so much for us to go on and on about.
And there are like in some instances like people who are better at talking about this than us,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and it's so fun to talk about with people who have like different sets of knowledges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um,
Do you want to talk just because maybe we
Mhm.
could do this like back to North America or Canada thing? Because I guess we were
Mhm.
talking a lot about India and like how
Yeah.
notions of mental health get framed there and then how it gets imported through the
Mhm.
diaspora to Canada, but then it also changes as like new generations come to Canada. So if we I think we started with like how Punjabis kind of got and like the first waves of migration to Canada and North
Mhm.
America, kind of. But yeah, do we want to chat a little bit more about
Yeah,
like newer waves and like yeah,
absolutely.
changing relationships with alcohol? Because I feel like when you told me about the dode and like the convenience stores or like the Indian
Right.
stores, I was like, I didn't know that. So that was
Yeah,
a
that was
fun
a
fact for
wild
me.
time in Canada. Yeah, and, like, speaking from Canada, it is an interesting place because of the diaspora and because of these happenings that happened with, like, the state, Punjabi diaspora specifically, and, like, I guess actors of the state, like police and politicians. But also a real hand in the community that was played there. And I think that is not an actor that we talk about enough, is the role of the Uppany community in policing what is okay and what isn't, and how we kind of have like a public facing view of like, no, we don't drink. Like that's sometimes a thing. We don't do drugs. That's not what we do. When we know that's
It's a
not.
good immigrant.
Yes, we are the good immigrant. We work, we pay our taxes, and we shut
Struggle
up. Like that's
silently. Yeah.
we can talk about the various reasons why there's been like an increase of Punjabi immigrants in from India to Canada, but like I guess in substance related things, there's some things that like if we talk about North America that are super relevant to that, and talking about like Uppany community
Hmm.
and how we are policing each other. So
Yeah.
going back, yeah, and we continue to see like it's not working. So what else can we do? This was the Asra podcast with Manvinder Gill and Ravia Dhaliwal.
Thank you for joining Saath, the Asra podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe or follow our social media at asra.now so you never miss an episode.
We would love to know what you think about today's episode. Please leave us a comment or send us a direct message. If you have any suggestions for future podcast guests, please fill out the Google form on our website or in the episode description. If you'd like additional information or resources in Punjabi or in English, please visit the ASRA website at www.asranow.ca. Thank you.